Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to our virtual Committee of Adjustment meeting. On your screen, you'll see members of our Committee of Adjustment. Now, behind the scenes, we have many staff members with us this evening, and even though you won't see them, you will hear them chime in from time to time. Our Secretary-Treasurer is Lindsay Stamen, and we also have clerks James Thompson and our new clerk, Elizabeth Fawcett, who are hosting the meeting and running the Zoom platform from behind the scenes. And welcome to our committee, Elizabeth. For those of you who don't know, Derek O'Shea has moved on into planning department. So we're happy to have Elizabeth with us here this evening. So for sure, James and Elizabeth are authorized to interrupt the meeting as the need arises. Now, the agenda and the schedules for the meeting have been posted on the city's website. And if you don't have those documents and you'd like to follow along, you might want to access them now. So we have 7 agenda items this evening, and I'd like to share with you the format that I'll be using to navigate through each application. I'll start by introducing an applicant, and then I'll give each applicant or their agent an opportunity to add anything further. If you are the applicant or the agent and you have nothing further to add, then simply say so. Next, I'll invite members of the committee to ask questions of either the applicant or staff. Then I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Now, at that time, I'll invite members of the public to raise their virtual hand in Zoom if they have any questions or comments in respect of the application. Now, if you do have a question or if you wish to make a comment, please don't expect an immediate answer. It's during this public portion of the meeting that we'll be recording your questions and your comments, and only after I close the public portion of the meeting will the questions and comments be addressed by the applicant, their agent, or staff. And next, I'll invite the applicant and or staff to address the public comments, after which I'll turn back to the committee and I'll ask them to make a motion and then deliberate on the application. At that time, if you're the applicant, then you're free to leave the meeting. Now, I'll be using the same format for each application this evening. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Now, if you have a personal interest in any particular application and you'd like to receive written notice of tonight's decision, please send an email with your name and address to our Secretary-Treasurer, Lindsay Stamen. Her email address is lstamann@cityofkingston.ca. So now I'll call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. and I'll refer you to the agenda. So committee members, can I call for a motion to approve the agenda, please? Okay, so moved by Vincent and seconded by Jordan.
Mr. Chair, I just want to ensure that the committee approves.
Sorry, Derek, or sorry, James, you just jumped out at the end.
Sorry. Sure, I just want to ensure that the committee approves the addendum as well as the agenda that was circulated.
Right, and Vincent and Jordan, you saw the addendum, you're referring to that as well? Okay, so we're good on that. So all in favor, raise your hand, and that's unanimously carried. Okay, now we'll be looking for confirmation of the minutes of the August 24th meeting. I think everybody has received a copy and you've had a chance to review it. Can I have somebody move approval of that? Okay, so moved by Somnath and seconded by Jordan. Any discussion on that at all? All right, so all in favor, raise your hand. All right, and that's unanimously carried. All right, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? If not, shake your head no.
Mr. Chair, I have, I'm just looking at the list of people below. A good friend of mine, I believe, is going to be one of the applicants. I don't have a pecuniary interest, but if that's too close for comfort for people, then I can simply recuse myself when that person arises.
I appreciate that. It's entirely your call, and maybe something we if you want to make that call now, we've got no problems.
Sure. No, I think I can be objective. It's I don't think it's very controversial either. So
okay.
No.
All right, so we'll let that go. Any other disclosures of pecuniary interest? All right, so seeing none, we'll move on. We have no delegations and there are no requests for deferral, and we have no returning deferred items. So the first item on our agenda this evening is actually item number 8A, which is an application for minor variance. So Lindsay, can I have you introduce this for us and read us into the record, please?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, fine. Thank you.
Perfect. So our first application tonight is for minor variance at 50 Patrick Street. The file number is D13-015-2020. And I will turn it over to Jason Partridge, who's the planner on this file, for a brief presentation.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Jason, thank you.
Yeah. So James, can you just put up the presentation? All right, so this is a presentation for 50 Patrick Street, a minor variance application, file number D13015-2020. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of this application is to construct a 3-story balcony/deck within the front yard and a 3rd-floor addition to the existing 1-family dwelling. The total area of the proposed 3-story balcony deck will be 10.38 square meters, and the 3rd-story addition will be 62.71 square meters. Minor variances were required to increase the minimum front yard and side yards for the decks and stairs of the proposed 3-story floor addition. Balcony and deck, front lot line and interior lot line minor variances for the main structure addition, and dormer setbacks for the 3rd-story windows. The proposed 3-story balcony and deck within the front yard in the 3rd-story or 3rd-floor addition to the existing 1-family dwelling is in keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw and represents appropriate and desirable development on the lot. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a breakdown. There's 6 minor variances here. As the committee read the report, any questions for these 6? So basically they're for the porch. The porch needs 1 setback for the front yard for above 1.2 meters and the steps, and then an interior lot line setback. The third story addition needs front yard setback, interior lot line setback, and dormer setbacks. Okay, next slide. No questions. So 50 Patrick Street is located between John Street and Raglan Road. You can see from the key map right there. Next slide, please. So this is a site plan provided by the applicant. You can see the 3rd-story addition on there, along with the proposed 3-story balcony at the front. Again, all the minor variances are listed on the other slide. Next slide, please. So this is a front elevation drawing. So the 3-story balcony and deck, and the 3rd-story addition with the dormer windows on the front. Next slide, please. There's another rendering from the front, from the north side, south side, and it would be the west side. Next slide, please. Requested variances maintain the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston zoning official plan and zoning bylaw 849. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land. Building the structures and requested variances are minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval. Approval of this application will allow for the construction of a 3-story balcony deck within the front yard and a 3rd-floor addition to the existing 1-family dwelling. That's the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so at this point, could I please ask the applicant and or their agent to identify themselves by name and address for the record, please? And I see Mr. Tao has his hand raised. Yep.
Yes, hi, my name is Mark Tao. I'm a planner with the IBI group. So both myself and the owner's designer, Heather Sorella, are here. We have nothing further to add to the staff report, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very good. Thanks very much. So I'll turn it over to the committee members. Do you have any questions for the applicant, staff, or the agent? And I see none. I say everybody shake their head no. Okay, yeah, Vincent, you have a question?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so reading part of this report, Is a lot of this like to recognize legal non-conforming? Or
So I can jump in for this one.
yeah,
Sure. Jason?
So there's nothing legal non-conforming. The only, the applicant is proposing a new deck. So currently today it's a 1-story deck with stairs. They're creating a brand new deck with more floor space. So it's 10.93 square meters and it's 3 floors. The 3rd floor would be a new addition. So right now it's just an attic. So it'd be a 3rd floor in total. So not non-conforming.
okay.
So everything new has to comply with the zoning bylaw. So the 2nd floor and 1st floor would be non-conforming, but the 3rd floor would need a variance for interior lot line.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions from the committee members?
Can I just confirm through you, Mr. Chair, that there's been no correspondence from any neighboring property?
No court, I haven't received anything. Lindsay or James? Have you received anything?
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that we did not receive any correspondence related to any of the files before the committee tonight.
Oh, okay. Very good. Okay, so nothing. That's good. Any other questions from committee members? All right, so now I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public here this evening to speak to the application for minor variance for 50 Patrick Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And Jason, can you confirm that we've not had any members of the public register for this application?
I can confirm. No
Okay.
members have registered.
Okay, so we'll just move on then to the committee members, and I'll ask for a motion. Okay, so moved by Somnath and seconded by Jordan. Any discussion? No discussion. All right, so all in favor, raise your hand. All right, and that's unanimously carried. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is 8B, which is application for minor variance, file number D13-036-2020. And Lindsay, can I have you introduce this to the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, 8B is an application for minor variance, file number D13-036-2020 at 266 Rideau Street. Tim Fisher will give the presentation for this application.
Very good.
Can everybody hear me?
We can. Hello, Mr. Fisher.
Perfect. Thank you, Lindsay. Through you, Mr. Chair, as you heard, the application is at 266 Rideau Street. It's a minor variance application, file number D13-036-2020. Next slide, please. So this report pretty much provides a recommendation to the Committee of Adjustment regarding the application for minor variance. The property located at 266 Rideau Street. The proposal is to construct a new roof with knee walls to create a half-story on top of the 2nd floor of an existing 2-story single detached dwelling. The half-story will provide a master bedroom suite while providing 2 bedrooms on the 2nd story. The applicant is also proposing to widen the existing covered porch over the Charles Street access to the home. The existing dwelling and the covered porch encroach into the minimum front yard setback along Rideau Street and the minimum exterior side setback along Charles Street. The variances are requested to reduce the minimum front yard and exterior side yard setbacks in order to build on the existing building footprint to construct the new roof and knee walls. An additional variance is also required to reduce the projections into the yards to permit the widening of the existing covered porch. Next slide. So we are looking at 5 variances here. The first variance, minimum front yard along Rideau Street. The requirement is 2.2 meters. They're proposing 2 meters. The second variance will be the minimum front yard along Charles Street. This is, sorry, the requirement is 1.27 meters, and they're proposing 0.87. The maximum percentage of lot coverage for this property, so it's 33.3%. And because they are actually widening the front porches, the percentage is actually going up. So they are proposing 50% as the proposed. However, the existing right now is only 49%. So it's actually only going to go up this 1%. However, we have to base it on the minimum requirement, or I should say in this case, the maximum percentage that's in the bylaw itself. So it may look like a large number, but in essence, it's only 1%. The fourth variance, minimum percentage of landscape open space. Again, that's another situation where because the front porches are widening, it's taking away from the landscape open space. So it's only going to be a small percentage here. However, we have to use the, or base it on the maximum, or in this case, minimum requirement. So the minimum requirement is 30%, and they're requesting 24%. And again, for the covered porches, the projections into yards, the current porches actually project already. However, the additions are going to project just a little more into it. So we need to recognize that. So 3.5 meters is the requirement, and they're reducing it down to 0.86 meters. Next slide. So here they are located right on the corner of Rideau Street and Charles. Very similar developments in the area. We got quite a mixture of single family, 2-family homes, multiple family homes, apartment buildings. It's a whole hodgepodge of different residential types here. Next slide. So here's the site plan that was provided. You can see the covered porch along Rideau Street. And the porch along Charles Street. So along Charles Street, the porch itself, and you'll see it in the next photograph, but the porch itself is not centered with the door. So what they want to do is just widen it slightly in order to have it look symmetrical to the door. And also it would give just a little more space for the owners as well. The additional floor space, it's an interesting situation. It's a smaller home, and there's 3 bedrooms currently on what we would consider the second floor right now. What they're going to do is remove 1 bedroom and make that into the stairway leading up into the master bedroom, which will now be located in the proposed half story, I guess you want to call it. Next slide. So here we could see the second floor plan. You can see the first 2 bedrooms, the bathroom, and what was a bedroom is now being converted into the stairway going upstairs. And then the loft itself, as you can see, they're not putting in dormer windows. They actually are putting in like a skylight type of window to allow natural light into the room. But it's just going to be just a large master suite. So in this case, they are asking for variances in order to allow the building to be built on the existing footprint. It's kind of a funny situation. However, because the existing building encroaches into the front yard setbacks, we have to look at the addition. So in other words, the loft would have to comply with today's setbacks, regardless of where the location of the existing house is. So that's why the variances are required, regardless of them building on the existing footprint and just going up. Next slide. And we can see here that their proposal actually complies with the height requirement of the zone. Where is it here? And The elevation on the right would be the elevation along Charles Street, and it would be, you could see the expansion of the dotted line, and to the right of it would be the expansion. So what they're doing is just making it just the front porch just a tad wider here. Next slide here. So our recommendation, the requested variances are consistent with the general purpose and general intent of both the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw. The variances meet all 4 tests under the Planning Act, and as such, the application is being recommended for approval, subject to the proposed conditions in Schedule A. Approval of this application will allow for the construction of the half-story addition on top of the existing 2-story single detached dwelling on the subject property, and the expansion of the covered porch. The proposed development is not anticipated to have any adverse impacts on the abutting residential properties. I leave this in your hands, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thanks very much, Tim. Could I ask the applicant or their agent to please identify themselves by name and address for the record?
Yes, Mr. Chair, my name is Christopher Omelon. I'm the applicant of 266 Rideau Street, and I'm here with my representative, Michaela Hughes.
Okay. Anything further either of you would like to add to the application we have before us this evening?
We have nothing further at this point.
Very good. All right. So I'll turn it over to the committee and ask the committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or their agent or staff? Please raise your hand. And Jordan?
Yes, my question could be for staff or it could be for you, Mr. Chair. And it's simply a matter of, I recognize there's 5 sort of different individual requests here for variances. Now, they seem to be appropriate for the development. They seem to maintain the zoning bylaw, and they seem to maintain the official plan. I'm just wondering, in anyone's experience here, when we get these applications with a number of variances, and I appreciate that minor is not a mathematical calculation, but do we ever find that something moves from the minor to the major, given the number of variances?
Good question. Maybe I would defer to staff maybe to answer that.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. That's a great question. And that's something that we deal with every day in our department. It really boils down to the type of development that they're proposing. You could have somebody with 12 variances. However, their proposal would seem minor. And as long as we can look at the official plan policies and the zoning bylaw and feel that they can comply with the general intent of them, of our policies and such, and still be considered minor in nature and also appropriate and desirable development for the neighborhood, then we could technically support it as through a minor variance. However, there are some that come in and maybe some of the variances may seem quite large, or they may be asking for something that might be a little out of the ordinary. In that case, we may ask for a zoning bylaw amendment. Again, it's not a precise tool of what we can use for one property versus another. It's all independent of each other. So,
thank you. I think that addresses my question.
Okay. Any other members of the committee have a question for the applicant or staff? And I don't see any. So I'll open the public portion of the meeting and ask, are there any members of the public here this evening who wish to speak to the application for minor variance 266 Rideau Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I'm not seeing anybody, but can I just confirm maybe from you, Tim, or from, Tim, do you know if we have any members of the public in the gallery this evening?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe so. And I have not received anything from the public during the public consultation stage.
Okay. Okay, very good. So I'll close the public portion of the meeting and I'll pull it back to the committee and ask for a motion. All right, so moved by Somnath and seconded by Vincent. Any discussion on this?
I have
Yeah,
something.
Jordan? Yeah.
Just given that there's no one here, we can confirm that notices did go out in terms of this meeting for members of the public.
And Tim, did you want to address that?
Yes. So we have published it on our website, and also we did publish it in the Kingston Whig. We did not do a public mail out because of the whole COVID situation right now. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Valid
I just
question.
figure it makes sense for the record to have that on there. So
Good. Very good. Any other discussion? Okay. So all in favor, raise your hand. And that would be unanimously carried. Thank you very much. All right, so the next application we have is for number 8C, which is for minor variance, file number D13-034-2020. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 272 Mowat Avenue. The file number is D13-034-2020, and Tim Fisher is also the planner on this application.
Okay, very good.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Through you, Mr. Chair. Everybody, you may recognize the property. This property was subject to a minor variance application that was addressed during the May 11th public meeting. And it was to reduce the minimum aggregate side yard requirement in order to remove the garage and build an addition on the northern portion of the house. After that meeting, the owner looked at his plans and has decided to keep the attached garage, however, tear it down and rebuild a new one. So the plans have changed, and because the plans have changed, where they're keeping the garage and also slightly changing the initial plans, they would have to come back to the Committee of Adjustment because it's no longer the same application, unfortunately. So in this case, we have an application for minor variance D13-034-2020 for 272 Mowat Avenue. Can we have the next slide? So previous application, I just explained that to you. So in this case, the minor variance application is to request a reduction in the minimum aggregate side yard, which is virtually the exact same as what was previously approved in May. However, in this case, it is to reconstruct the attached garage located on the southern portion and to allow an addition to the northern portion of the property. Now, the addition is to accommodate a second residential unit, which in our review would comply with the secondary residential units in the bylaw. Next slide. So the bylaw they're actually requesting, again, it's the exact same variance as what they were applying for in May. So the aggregate side yard requirement is 3.6 meters, and they're proposing 2.5 meters. A little bit of history about the aggregate side yard requirement, just real quick. The aggregate side yard requirement is really there in 8499 in order to provide access along one side of the property to parking either within the side yard or access into the rear yard. It doesn't, the bylaw doesn't make any exclusions if you happen to have an attached garage. So in this case, an attached garage, they're still going to have a driveway. They're still going to have a driveway leading up to parking. However, it's going to be parking within a attached garage. So it still meets the intent of the bylaw. However, that I just wanted to explain why the aggregate side yard was really put there in the first place. So we can go to the next slide. So as you can see, the subject property is on the west side of Mowat Avenue between Forsyth Avenue and Herbert Street. And it is surrounded actually by a mix of residential types. We got single family, two family, we got multiple family, and I believe there is one low rise walk-up apartment building just down the road from it as well too. Next slide. So as you can see on the left, the site plan shows the existing situation, the 2-car garage, and then the house that's attached into the back. And in this case, on the right, they're looking at rebuilding the garage virtually on the exact same footprint. And then the hashed marks would be where the addition is going to go. So how they're going to have it set up, we can go to the next slide and I can show you. So as you can see, the second residential unit is actually going to be located in the basement, or what would look like the basement, I should say. So it would have its own access. You have a kitchen, living room, dining room. You have the bedrooms and a rec room. And then there's a stairway that, as you can see in the middle of the house, that will actually take you upstairs to the principal unit. And there you can see we have a study, dining room, living room. So virtually upstairs is staying the same. The only thing that's being added there is we're looking at a study and a large roof deck, which would provide them with outdoor privacy amenity area for the upper unit. Next slide, please. And here it shows the concept of the elevations. Now, it is interesting because the elevation here, it's higher in the back versus the front. So instead of having what we would typically see as a walkout basement, you actually, that faces the back of the house, we actually have a walkout basement that faces the front of the house. So that's why it appears to be a 2-story house from the front, but it's actually not. You're actually seeing the basement in the first floor. Next slide. So again, the requested variance maintains the general intent of both the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw 8499. The proposal is desirable and appropriate for this type of development. The building or structure and the requested variance is obviously minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests under subsection 45.1 of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval. And again, the approval will allow them to provide them with an addition, be able to rebuild the garage that's there, and also overall allowing them to have the second dwelling unit. Also, just to let you know, we have not heard anything from the public. We have not received anything in writing. And I guess I will leave this in your hands.
Okay, thanks very much, Tim. And at this point, can I please have the applicant or their agent identify themselves by name and address for the record?
Hi, yeah, Sunil Vazram, 272 Mowat Avenue, Kingston.
Okay, and welcome back again
Thank you.
to this. Yeah, is there anything further you wish to add to the application we have before us this evening?
No, that's it.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to the committee. Committee members, do you have any questions for either the applicant or staff? I see everybody shaking their head no. So I'll now turn to the public portion of the meeting. Are there any members of the public or anybody in the galley for that matter interested in the application for minor variance for 272 Mowat Avenue? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I've already confirmed from staff that there are no public members in the galley or gallery wishing to speak to this. So I'll close the public portion and come back to the committee members for a motion. Somebody want to move? Okay, so moved by Somnath and seconded by Jordan. And any discussion on this? No discussion. So all in favor, raise your hand. And that would be carried. Oh, that's it. Thanks very much for being here. That's carried
Thanks.
unanimously.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay, so our next agenda item is number 8D, which is an application for minor variance, file D13032-2020. And Lindsay, can I have you introduce this to the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an application for minor variance at 2701 Patterson Road. The file number is D13-032-2020, and Phil Prell is the planner for this application.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hello,
Yes.
everyone. My name is Philip Prell, and I'll be guiding you through this application today. All right, so this is at 2701 Patterson Road. It's for a minor variance, and it's for today's meeting. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to amend accessory building regulations to permit an 18-foot garage where only a 15-foot garage is permitted as of right. And the applicant is also proposing a zone compliant patio that would be attached to this garage. In effect, they are asking for a variance to increase the height by 3 feet or 0.9 meters from what is permitted at 15 feet. Next slide, please. As you can see on the map here, the property is a rural area and it is near the border of the city limits here in Kingston and is right off Battersea Road as well on a local street known as Patterson Road. Next slide, please. So this is the site or plot plan that was provided by the applicant, and it denotes the setbacks from the other properties nearby. In particular, the one to focus on is the 20-foot setback from 2711, as that would be the highest potential for potential quote unquote intrusive overlook, or in terms of having a building that would be perceived from another property that wouldn't necessarily be permitted as of right. In this case, it would be the 3-foot increase. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed garage here, and there are a couple things I wanted to point out. In particular, if you look at the right elevation, which is the central top image there are no windows proposed on the side that is facing, that would be closest to the applicant. So the place that had the 20-foot setback would have no windows, so there would be no increase in potential look into a private rear yard of the neighbor. In addition to that, there's a patio that is actually, if you look at the image to the left at the top part, the patio is actually being covered by the garage itself. So despite more activity happening in terms of having your neighbor having people over, the sound and potentially the visual overlook will be mitigated by the addition of the garage as well. And when looking at the windows that are on the left elevation, those windows are facing back onto the applicant's own property. And next slide, please. The next slide shows that there's a row of trees that it also buffers between the garage itself, the proposed garage, and the neighboring property. Now, of course, those leaves aren't going to be there year round, but the fact that they are there would potentially mitigate this increase of height in terms of being seen from another property during most times of the year. Next slide, please. So my recommendation here is to approve this based on the fact that it is maintaining the general intent and purpose of the City of Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw 7626. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of land, building or structure, and the requested variance is minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests under section 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is recommended for approval subject to proposed conditions. And the effect would essentially allow this garage to go 3 feet higher from the 15-foot regulation and be 18 feet in height. And the next slide shows the proposed conditions. And that's all for me, everybody. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thanks for the presentation. At this point, can I please call on the applicant and or their agent to identify themselves by name and address, please?
Mr. Chair, the applicant notified us late this afternoon that they are still out of Kingston on business, but they had nothing additional to add and they would like their application to proceed.
To move ahead. Okay, so committee members, do you have any questions of staff and even potentially for the applicant at this point? If not, I see none at all. So Jordan?
Oh,
Yep.
In one of the pictures, it looked like there was already a structure in place. So maybe I missed something. Is the plan to get rid of that existing structure and completely build a brand new garage?
I can
And
address
maybe-
that, Mr. Chair.
Yes, yes.
So I believe you're looking at would be slide 6 under additional considerations. Is that the one you're referring to, Jordan?
I believe so, yeah.
So I believe that garage is technically below the requirement for a building permit. So it doesn't actually appear on our normal plan. And this would be behind that one even further.
Okay, gotcha. So further back on the property?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, good. Thanks. Any other questions for staff or potentially applicant? I see none at all. Okay, so I'll move over to the public. I'll open the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public here, or is anybody interested in speaking to or making a comment to the application for minor variance for 2701 Patterson Road? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And Phil, can you just confirm that we don't have any members of the public here to speak to this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have not received any correspondence from the public to date.
Okay, thanks very much. So on that, I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion, please. So moved by Vincent, seconded by Jordan. Any discussion on this? None at all. Okay, so all in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. All right, thanks very much. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is number 8E, which is an application for minor variance, file number D13-038-2020. And Lindsay, can I have you read this into the record, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, 8E is an application for minor variance at 800 Riverview Way. The file number is D13-038-2020. And we'll go back to Phil, who is also the planner on this application.
Thanks very much.
Hello again, everybody.
Hi.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So this application is for a minor variance at 800 Riverview Way. Next slide, please. So the purpose and effect of this proposal is that the applicant is proposing to add a 66 square meter deck across the back of an existing residential dwelling that is in excess of the 30 square meter maximum permitted for a structure above 1.2 meters from finished grade in a residential zone. It's a mouthful, I know, but the pictures will help, I promise. When looking at the variance here, essentially what we're doing is that because it's 1.2 meters above finished grade, the intent here is that there's a limited size of deck to reduce the potential for overlook into other people's properties. So you wouldn't want a really high deck that you could then look into people's rear and side yard and windows. And that's essentially the purpose of this particular regulation. So they're proposing to increase this from 30 to 66 for an increase of 36 square meters. Next slide, please. So as we can see here, this is located in the eastern part of Kingston, or former Pittsburgh Township, and is located in a subdivision that is being built out still. Next slide, please. This site survey was included because it denotes that the property itself is a quote unquote pie shape, which means that there's going to be lower potential for intrusive overlook. Because if you were in a line of properties, you could potentially see into multiple properties. But by doing a pie shape, there's only limited areas that can be seen from the elevated deck in the rear yard. It is still present, and we will be discussing some other mitigation factors in a moment, but it is something that it should be taken of note. Next slide, please. So when looking at the top image up here, it shows that similar to Mr. Fisher's application, the elevation changes. And the purpose and intent of this regulation really focuses, or it's assumed that everything is on the same grade. However, the front yard, if this deck of the same size was proposed in the front yard, we wouldn't be having this variance discussion because that would be permitted as of right for that area. However, because the rear yard is above 1.2 meters from finished grade, in fact, well above 1.2 meters, that regulation kicks in, which is why we have to vary this regulation. If you look below, that is the proposed new deck. The Miller residence that's already existing is over there, and it would be something else to note when looking at the deck are the generous property line boundaries from the edge of the deck to the property lines to the east and west. And those are both in excess of what the bylaw would require for the property itself, even if it was more onerous ones that were triggered by having the building itself have to use those setbacks, which kicks in once again when it's above 1.2 meters from finished grade to reduce the potential for intensive overlook. Next slide, please. So this one is recommended for approval because it meets the general intent and purpose of the Kingston official plan and zoning bylaw 3274, and the proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of land, building, or structure, and the requested variance is minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests under subsection 45(1) of the Planning Act, and the application is being recommended for approval subject to the following conditions. And just to sum it up earlier, this would be the effect of this proposal would be approving a deck size from what is permitted as of right. So it would go from 30 to 66 for an increase of 36 square meters. And due to the location, due to the setbacks of the nearby properties and relative and easements that are around it, we believe that it should be recommended for approval. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks very much for that. At this point, I'd like to call on the applicant and or their agent to identify themselves by name and address for the record, please. I think we have you, Mr. Miller. Oh, Mr. Miller, we can't hear you. We've got no audio. I could see his mic is unmuted, but Mr. Miller, we can't hear you at all.
Does that work now?
Oh, that works now. Yep. So, Mr. Miller, just to have you, I guess, state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Robert Miller, 800 Riverview Way.
Great. And is there anything further you wish to add to the application this evening?
No, it looks like the application speaks for itself, and I think Mark Tao from IBI Group is potentially listening as well in case there's any additional questions.
Very good. Thanks for that. Okay, so I'll turn it over to the committee. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant or their agent or staff?
I have a question for Mr. Prell.
Yep. Jordan?
Mr. Prell, through you, Mr. Chair, doubling the deck size, even despite the sort of difference in height and the front and back of the property, in your estimation and the totality of the circumstances in your experience, that is still a variance that is minor in nature, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe so. And this is something I should have actually mentioned a bit earlier that I missed, so I apologize for that. If you, under slide number 4, for the site survey, I forgot to mention a couple other things. Is that okay to be brought up again quickly? So
for sure. Absolutely.
I had a question about the site survey as well, so if we could leave that up after too.
Perfect. 2 birds, 1 stone.
There you go.
So when looking at the property, if you're looking what is called block 71 and block 72, so block 71 is actually a Utilities Kingston access lane that is going to be meant to be opened up, so that it further increases the potential setback that this property would be looking into other people's property. So it would be even further away than what we would normally expect to see. So in this case, we would see that there would be a reduced and minimal potential for intrusive overlook. And then when looking at block 72, that's a CRCA watercourse setback. And so that further increases more land that would be potential for overlook. In addition to that, to the west and to the south of this property, they're both areas that do not permit residential uses as principal uses. So when looking back at those, there is a consideration if there were residential uses that this elevated deck would be able to see into other people's property. However, since both of those areas are quarry and floodplain areas, there's going to be no residential units there. And especially since these regulations are meant to apply to residential uses in the first place, it doesn't seem applicable in this particular case. So to answer your question, Jordan, I do believe that in this case, it is a large deck, I agree, but based on the site configuration, based on the easements to the south and to the northwest, I believe that there is enough of a setback that would reduce any potential for overlook that would result from this larger deck.
I've got to say, Mr. Prell, my next question was going to be about what Block 71 is and whether that's sort of a pathway. So you read my mind, sir. You've confirmed everything for me. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, Jordan.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Are there any other questions from the committee to staff or the applicant? And actually, I can't see all the committee members, so can I just have the slide removed and go back to normal screen? Okay, committee members, any other questions for staff or the applicant? I see none at all. Okay, so I'll open up the public portion of the meeting. Mr. Park, did you, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a clarification on something Mr. Perel just said he may not have been aware for. There actually is a rezoning and official plan amendment, as well as a plan of subdivision application on the quarry lands located to the south of this existing subdivision. So just to clarify that, but as a point of clarification, the elevation of the existing dwelling on 800 Riverview is probably about 40 meters above grade, yeah, where those, if it is even approved, because it still hasn't gotten to that point, potential future residential units would be located. So I would concur with Mr. Prell that it would not provide any issues of overview, but I just wanted to clarify that there is an active subdivision OP and zoning application on the quarry land site.
Great. Thanks very much for that clarification. That's very good. Okay, so at the public portion of the meeting now, are there any members of the public or is there anybody in the room who wishes to speak to the application for minor variance for 800 Riverview Way? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I'm not seeing anybody, but in the meantime, I'll just confirm with Mr. Prell that there are no members of the public who are in the gallery this evening.
That is correct. I have received no notices to speak tonight.
Okay, so I'll close the public portion of the meeting, turn it back to the committee for a motion, please. Okay, moved by Jordan and seconded by Somnath. And any discussion on this at all? I see none at all. Okay, so all in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thanks very much. Okay, the next application we have is number 8F, which is an application for minor variance D13035-2020. And Lindsay, can I please have you read this into the record?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Next up is an application for minor variance at 444 Victoria Street, file number D13035-2020. This one is my application, so we can move straight into the presentation.
Perfect.
All right, so the purpose of this application is to construct an addition on the back and on top of an existing residential building to accommodate a second residential unit. 4 variances are required for this proposal. Next slide, please. Here is the key map showing the location of the subject property, as well as a photo of the existing structure that was taken from Google Street View. The subject property is right in the middle of that photo. Next slide, please. So these are the 4 variances that are requested. The first variance is to maximum building depth. The maximum depth permitted is 11.8 meters, and the applicant is proposing 16.9 meters. It's worth noting here that the existing building is 14.5 meters deep, and the addition will be only an extra 2.4 meters in depth. The existing depth of 14.5 meters is a legal non-complying situation. Variances number 2 and 3 are related to the side yard and the aggregate side yard reduction for both of those. And I'll also note here that the proposed addition is the same width as the existing structure. It's triggering variances here because the existing structure is non-complying. The last variance is for a reduction in the minimum driveway width. The existing driveway is subject to an easement, which grants shared access between 444 and 440 to the south. And it extends from the front lot line almost to the rear wall of the existing dwelling. This will be shown on the site plan on the next slide. The existing building is 2.4 meters from the southern lot line, and it's not possible to accommodate a 3-meter wide driveway wholly on the 444 Victoria Street property. The applicant has requested this variance as an alternative to extending the length of the existing easement. So if we go to the next slide here, this is the site plan. It demonstrates all of the required variances. The proposed new depth, the new construction, is shown in the area with the diagonal lines. And the easement and driveway is to the south of the property. Next slide, please. Here we have the floor plans and elevations for the proposed structure. The rear unit is proposed to contain 6 bedrooms, and the front unit is proposed to contain 5 bedrooms. So we'll have a total of 11 bedrooms on this site with this proposal. And the height is proposed to increase from the existing 1.5 stories to 2 stories. The proposed height complies with the zoning bylaw. And we'll move to the next slide. We are recommending approval of this application for minor variance. Approval will permit the construction of an addition to accommodate a second residential unit. And I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Lindsay. All right. So can I ask the applicant or their agent to identify themselves by name and address for the record, please? And Mr. Tao, I see you're raising your hand.
Yes, so Mark Tao again from IBI Group, or still with IBI Group, so representing the owner in terms of planning applications. The applicant, his agent, Heather Sorrell, is also available to answer any questions. She was the designer as well. So.
Okay, very good. So committee members, I'll turn it over to you. Do you have any questions for the applicant or their agent or for staff? And Vincent?
You're on mute, Vincent.
Oh,
Yeah.
There you go.
So that's a lot of bedrooms to add just in a small area. So I was wondering, what is the purpose of adding these bedrooms? What's the purpose of, is it for student housing, or doesn't look like it'll be for like family housing? Can that be clarified?
Maybe
So
Mr. Tao. Yeah,
through you, Mr. Chair. I believe the owner anticipates it to be available for rental, and it's in or close to the university district. So, likely occupants would be post-secondary students. So consistent with the other, other rentals in the area. It's worth noting that the subject property, if you compare the existing dwelling to others in the area, it stands out in that it's quite small. It's single story, and a bit of an anomaly, I guess, on the block in the neighborhood in terms of its existing size. So certainly the increase in height to 2-story is consistent with the height found in the neighborhood, or the predominant average height found in the neighborhood. And then the addition is intended as a secondary unit, similar to other secondary units found in the neighborhood, or third units, fourth units. So there does tend to be a range and mix of housing units or unit types found in the neighborhood.
So also, having this many people in like a small area, I'm assuming that may have a negative impact on the neighbors depending on who's living there, right? Yeah, I don't really have any other questions. Thanks.
Okay. No other questions? Okay, at this point, I'll open up the public portion of the meeting. Are any members of the public here this evening to speak to the application for 444 Victoria Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I'll just confirm with Lindsay, do you know public wishing to speak to this application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have not received any correspondence from the public on this application.
Okay, thanks very much. So on that, I'll close the public portion of the meeting and I'll turn it back to the committee for a motion. Yes, moved by Jordan and seconded by Somnath. And any discussion? No discussion. So all in favor, raise your hand and hold it. So that's 3-4 against. All right, so 3-4 and 1 against. So that would be carried. All right, and our final agenda item is number 8G, which is an application for minor variance, file number D13-029-2020. Lindsay, can I have?
Through you, Mr. Chair, our last application tonight is for minor variance at 390 Montreal Street. The file number is D13-029-2020, and the planner is Jason Partridge.
Can everyone hear me? Hello? Good. Through you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for 390 Montreal Street. It's a minor variance application, file number D13-029-2020. Next slide, please. The purpose and effect of this application is to construct a 2-story balcony deck within the front yard near the eastern front property line. The total area of the proposed 2-story balcony will be 10.53 square meters. Minor variances are required to decrease the minimum front and side yard for the decks and stairs setbacks within the zoning bylaw 8499. The proposed two-story balcony deck is keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw and represents appropriate and desirable development of the lot. Next slide, please. So the type of variances that are being requested, one is for the deck itself due to the fact that it's 1.2 meters above grade. They are proposing 3.4 meters from the property line. Variance 2 would be for the steps, and they were proposing 2.7 meters from the property line. Next slide, please. So this is the key map where it's located. It's between Stephen Street along Montreal Street, and just south of it is the City of Kingston building. I believe it's Family Services. Next slide, please. So right here, as you can see at the front, it notes the proposed development and the stairs and the deck itself. Next slide, please. So it's a 2-story deck. One's going to the top unit at the top, and the next one is to the main unit at the bottom. This would be facing out towards Montreal Street as well. Next slide, please. Recommendation: the requested variance maintains the general intent and purpose of both the City of Kingston official plan and the zoning bylaw 8499. The proposal is desirable for the appropriate development of use of the land. Building and structures requested variances are minor in nature. As such, the proposed application meets all 4 tests of subsection 45 of the Planning Act. We recommend approval for this application. And it's important to note, we have not received any public input on this application yet.
Okay, great.
Stand
Thanks,
back to you,
Jason.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Okay, can I please ask the applicant and or their agent to identify themselves by name and address? And Mr. Park has a question or a comment at this point.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I just wanted to remind the committee that we're dealing with the report that was attached in the addendum for this subject property.
Right, and members of the committee are aware of that. That was, I think, just a clerical issue. Okay, yep, very good. All right, so I see Mr. Cormier, you have your hand raised.
Hi, I'm the owner at 390 Montreal Street
Yep.
with my partner,
Okay.
Kimberly Cormier. I am Andrew Embry.
Andrew, okay. And do you have anything further you wish to add to the application we have?
Nope, not at all.
Not at all. Okay. All right. So I'll turn it over to the committee members. Do you have any question for the applicants or staff?
Question for staff.
Yes, Jordan.
You know, I noticed that the recommendation page at the end of these presentations all address the 4 tests that we're to consider here at the Committee of Adjustment. Second test is, you know, is the variance desirable for the appropriate development? And what we hear in the summary and the recommendation is, yes, it is desirable for the appropriate development. So my question is, can you give us an example why this requested variance here is appropriate for this development or its use?
Okay.
As opposed to just stipulating that it is, can you tell us one reason why it is?
So through you, Mr. Chair, appropriate and desirable development. If you look at, it's within the front yard, so no adverse impacts or to the neighboring property. So to the, I guess it would be the south of the property is the big field and parking lot that's owned by the city of Kingston. So no intrusive overlook would happen. Also, this is within an A zone of the property, the neighborhood. So if you went out to the site, you could see all the houses are lined up with the same front yard setback. So putting a deck with a balcony in the front yard you won't be able to see into other people's bedrooms or anything like that because the houses are all lined up along the street evenly. And across the street is a ballpark, Cook's Arena, and a big open field.
Mm-hmm. That was well put, Mr. Partridge. Thanks very kindly.
Okay, any other questions from the committee to the applicant or staff? And I see shaking heads. Okay, so I'll open up the public portion of the meeting. Is anybody here this evening to speak to the application for 390 Montreal Street? Please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. And I don't see anybody. And I've also heard from Mr. Partridge that nobody was registered for the meeting for public comment. And so on that, I'll close the public portion of the meeting and come back to the committee for a motion, please. So moved by Jordan and seconded by Somnath. Any discussion? So all in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so that's it for the applications this evening. So moving on our agenda, we have no motions and no notices of motion. There is no other business. Have you had a chance to review the delegated authority applications in progress? Do you have any questions or comments about them? I see none. Okay, there was no correspondence received for us. And so the date of the next meeting is set to be October 19th. And at that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. So moved by Somnath and seconded by Vincent. And that is carried. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great month.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.